I'm Mandy from Fit to Sew. In this video from my Sew You Want to Make a Bra series of tutorials, we're going to be having a look at the Gothic Arch alteration. If you're not familiar with this alteration, it's a very attractive way of making the irregular full band bra pattern slightly less clunky in the front, for want of a better expression. I am going to show you how to make the styling alterations to your regular full band bra pattern, and then I'll talk you through the techniques for sewing it that I've found to be the most successful and logical for me. So if you're not familiar with Gothic Arch, I'm just going to show you the difference between a regular full band pattern and one with a Gothic Arch, and you can decide whether it's something that you'd like to do on your bras. So what exactly do we mean by a Gothic Arch? Well, it's easier if I just show you. So this bra is a classic bra, and it has a straightforward straight bottom edge, and the bridge section is quite deep, as you can see. So the bottom edge of the band is kind of level between the two cups. This one, however, has had the Gothic Arch alteration done to it, and so you can see that this comes up into the center, so that all the fabric that was in there has now disappeared. So this comes up to quite a pretty shape. There are two reasons why, well, more than two, but the main reason for doing this is, one, aesthetically. This is quite pretty, and it's slightly less kind of clunky than this one without so much fabric in the center. It's more like a ready to wear kind of a styling, I suppose. So it does look nice, and it's just slightly different. The other reasons are more for comfort than just simply the fact that it looks nicer, because if you have some fluff going on in between this section, which, let's face it, a lot of us do, whether it's just sort of general fluff, whether your ribs might splay out a little, or maybe if you're pregnant and so this section of your body is going to fill out, or you just simply don't want fabric across here, then the Gothic Arch is the way forward, and it looks pretty. It's an interesting alteration to make. If you've never made pattern alterations before, I think it's quite a nice one to start with, to kind of find your way around how to alter patterns. And yeah, I think it's just a very pretty thing to do. So let's have a look at the mechanics of how do we change the pattern. Okay, so first of all, we need the front frame pattern piece, and it's a lot easier, well, and more sensible to make this styling alteration on your pattern piece that's your final pattern piece. If you've had to do any fitting alterations or so on, then try and have those done before you start to do the style. Fit is more important than style. So get your band that fits, and then we can restyle it, because otherwise the restyling that you do may then be lost or change slightly if you then go in and start making fitting alterations to your band. So start off with the final version of your band that you want to use for this bra. So this is my tissue piece that I've used, and I have just to show you so that it's easier to see on camera and so on, I've photocopied it onto a piece of white paper, but normally I would be using doing these alterations direct onto the tissue. So the kind of rule number one of doing pattern alterations is that you need to focus on the finished item, by which I mean currently this piece of pattern has got seam allowance around here for the cups and elastic allowance at the bottom. We need to ignore those really, and so that we can see what the pattern alteration will look like on the finished item. I'm not sure if I'm making any sense, I'm probably not, but I'm gonna bear with me and we'll see how it goes. So the first thing I want to do is to mark in this particular one has a, that looks really big. Let me just check that. Oh no, it's just about right. This has a 3/4 inch bottom band elastic allowance, 19mm bottom band elastic allowance. So I've marked that in, and then I'm going to mark in my 1/4 inch seam allowance around here, just so that I can kind of see what's happening before I start to do any alterations. Now this band is actually from a classic, and it already has been designed with a little kind of bit of a Gothic arch. It does, well, maybe not Gothic arch, but it does come up slightly in the middle, as you can see by the angle. So I don't want to come up too much higher on this particular pattern, but I do want it to be a bit higher. So I usually go by, you can see there's a notch here on this pattern. This notch is where the upper cup and the bottom cup seam line is. I don't like to bring a Gothic arch up much higher than that. There are a couple of reasons for that. You don't want this bridge section to end up being too short, because I feel that you're in danger, particularly in larger sizes. You then run the risk of interfering with the engineering structure side of things. If this is too short, then you can have the whole thing tip forward, so that your breasts tip forward and potentially even fall out, which nobody wants to have happening. And you kind of lose some of the support. And that might just be my imagination, but that's how I work on this. I don't like it to come up too high. So certainly not much higher than that. Now, if the pattern that you're using is not one of these patterns and it doesn't have a notch there already, then the way I like to look at it is that this is the bottom of the cup bowl, and it curves along here, and then all of a sudden it shoots up at a much deeper curve, and that's the level at which I would go no higher. I don't want it to be up in here, so it's sort of fairly smooth, and then it goes a lot sharper, and that's where I would like this to be. Okay, so having got there, I then need to decide the angle that I want this to come out at. There's no hard and fast rule on this. It kind of goes by eye. But I think you can possibly see that if I made this too wide, so if I decided I was going to alter my pattern here, I end up, sorry, let me pretend that that's there. Hopefully you can see what I mean. I end up in this section with very little fabric left. So that's going to make it quite difficult for sewing the elastic and so on, but also it gives you very little fabric in this area here as it starts to run under the breast, and I think then you may as well kind of make a partial band at this point, I think. So I don't like it to be too steep, but you need it to look purposeful. So I'm going to just go kind of here by eye, and I quite like that. It's more or less halfway between this notch and the center front. That's kind of coincidence. I wouldn't say that you necessarily have to have that. It will depend on the size of your band, of course, but I quite like that. So sorry, that was a short interlude there while the chap next door was just cutting his grass. Anyway, I was just saying that I quite like that shape there, but it's too much of an angle. So if you have seen my videos on how to make a bra, or you've made one yourself already, you will know that elastic doesn't go around corners. So we need to do something in this section here. So I'm going to just carefully blend that, not that carefully, that doesn't look very nice. Let me rub that out. There we go. Just a little bit of a curve. Can you see? That's going to come around there just like that, so it makes it just easier to manipulate the fabric for the elastic to go around. So I'm quite happy with that. This is going to be gone, and that's how it's going to be. But the thing is, we have worked this to the finished edge. I've disregarded my elastic allowance while I was doing the styling alteration, but now I have to put it back to make this back into a workable pattern piece. So I just need to come along here and start to mark back my 3/4 of an inch elastic allowance, or obviously if you were doing this, whatever size elastic allowance you've got for your pattern, and smooth that round. Let me rub that out because it's this piece here that's disappearing. So that is now my finished edge, and I would cut that out and mark it up as being the pattern piece of the Gothic Arch. Obviously it is when you look at it, but as I keep saying, probably when you're rummaging through your folder or your wherever it is that you keep your pattern pieces, it's handy to just be able to glance at a pattern piece and see what it is, rather than try and work out what's this piece supposed to be. So I would write on here that this is now my Gothic Arch style alteration, and then we're good to go to cut it out and sew it up. Okay, I've gone ahead and sewn my band pieces together. So I've sewn my back band piece onto my frame. You can see now, I think, now that it's opened out, how nicely that forms a Gothic arch in here. And I'm going to show you how to sew the elastic on. Sewing the elastic on, we're going to do it in 2 passes, just the same as normal, but there's some important steps that you need to do that's different. Obviously we can't have elastic go up here and come down there. So the elastic is going to be in 2 sections, but don't cut your elastic in half. Fold your elastic in half, whoopsie, like this, and then lay it on your frame with the plush side up and the fancy edge pointing in, just the same as you would normally. But this time we're going to lay it along the bottom angle, so that my whoopsie daisy folded edge of the elastic sits just on there on the frame. Hope you can see that. So I'm just resting it on the opposite edge, so I'm coming right across the front here to this opposite edge, and I want to now mark a line. I can see, you may not be able to see because it's black, but I can see where my fold was in my piece of Duoplex where I laid my pattern out. So along that fold line I'm just going to mark a dotted line like that. Okay, then I want to take this away, keep hold of it, or you could put a pin, but it's quite tricky, and I'm going to just sew along that line. I just need a long straight stitch because I'm going to pull the stitching out in a second, but I want to just hold the elastic together at that angle. So just a few stitches across there. Just to keep that shape. I'll switch that off again so you can see better. Okay, so now I've got my elastic kind of pre-shaped into that Gothic arch that I need it to be. So now I've got that, to bring my frame back in, and I'm going to sew, at least I can only sew this half at a time. I don't know anyone that could do it all at once, so I do it half at a time. Now I've got my elastic like this and open it out, and where my, sorry, I should have done this sooner. Let me put some pins where the fold line originally was on my fabric. There we go. There, so that was my fold, and I'm going to line my elastic up, double checking, plush side up, fancy edge into towards the bra, and the bottom edge of the elastic and the bottom edge of the fabric matching up. And I want to place this so that my little stitched line is in line with my pins. I hope you can see. It's really tricky to know where to put my arms. There we are. So it's all in a line like that. And then I will put a pin in, primarily because I've forgotten to bring my wonder clips over here. There we go. Okay, so all of that goes out of the way. I am now going to stitch this with a narrow zigzag. First pass, the same as you would have done already. I'm doing a narrow zigzag close to this picot edge on this side of the elastic, and I'm going to start as close as I dare to that center point there. It's sometimes helpful to have put a pin on the other side, but I won't do that now. Okay, I'll just switch this on. and I'm setting my machine narrow zigzag. I like a 2 width and a 2 length. I might go 2.2, just live dangerously today. There we are, and line this all up. So this is not for the faint-hearted, this Gothic Arch. You do ideally need to have done a couple of bras to have got the feel for the fabrics, but I'm putting my needle in as close to that stitching line without catching this side of the elastic, so keeping away from the fold as much as I can, and just lining that up there. Just hand crank it to get in the right place. When I'm happy that I'm in the right place, I'm going to do my locking stitch. As I may have said in a previous video, if you haven't got the locking stitch facility on your machine, I don't think it's a good idea to back stitch it. But it's best to secure it if you can. So if you haven't got the locking stitch, make sure you've left long enough tails that you can just tie it together when you finish sewing it, just to make sure it doesn't move. And you'll see why when we come to do the other side. So I need to keep my edge lined up there along this straight bit, so just a few stitches along here. Take out my pin. Okay, so now it's getting a bit more tricky, so bearing in mind you can't curve elastic, you have to just keep feeding in your fabric to match the bottom edge. Okay. So I'm going to sew all the way to the end. Just keeping the tension that you normally would keep on your elastic, just the same as any other bra. The exciting bit is in the middle, the rest of it's just the same as you would normally do. That. Okay, now this next bit kind of took me a couple of goes to work out this is what I needed to do. I find I now need to come this way. Sorry, let's switch that off. I need to now stitch in this direction. I can't stitch from the back and come towards the front without knowing how much tension to put on it. I want both sides of my bra to have the same amount of tension. So it's either you need to start this way and trundle round, which yeah, you can do, but you won't know until you get to the end how much elastic. So anyway, to cut a long story short, I established for myself that if I now cut this spare elastic off, like that, this now is my template for my other side. So if I take the other side of my elastic, the free end, and just trim off the same amount, now I know that this length, this side of the elastic is going to be the same as that side when it's finished, and so there'll be the same amount of tension. I might slightly distribute it differently depending on how I pull, but at least I know that it's going to be the same both sides. I hope that makes sense. So now I'm going to come and start back at the center, just to show you. I can take these pins out now, can't I? Because you've seen that. You just tidy up these threads. I've got quite a few going on here. Okay, so now I need to start at the center again, but I have to be really careful that I don't catch the other side in when I start this side. I don't know that makes a lot of sense with me just saying it like that, so I'll show you what I mean. I'll make a start on this. Again, I want to be close to the edge, but I can feel where the fold of the elastic is, and I want to make sure that I don't sew that bit. It's not the end of the world if you do. It just means, I'll just put it back on zigzag, silly me. It just means that you have to unpick some of it. So there we are. Okay. I have to try and remember to turn the sewing machine light off so that you can see properly when I'm demonstrating something, but I don't always remember to adjust the stitch when I switch the machine back on. I'm sure you've all done the same. Okay, so just a few stitches and then keeping it straight along the edge there, and then as necessary just moving the fabric round, just that little bit of tension on the elastic. Same here. And then I just want to sort of check that I'm going to hold these two ends together. Having gone to the trouble of measuring, I want to keep it there. I'm going to just pop a little pin in. I know normally I say that you can't pin elastic, you have to let it find its own way, but we already have established what its own way is, how long it needs to be, so we need to keep control of that. So just make sure that you've got the same tension as you'd put on the other side, and carry on stitching this round. As I say, make sure they match at the end there. To the end. Okay, so that's both sides done, and they will be the same length as each other, so that's all okay. Now I need to sort out some of these tails here. If you didn't have a lock stitch facility or whatever in the middle, you can then pull these thread tails through and tie them in a knot. But what I was trying to say to you before, and not explaining myself very well I don't think, was that you need to make sure that both sides of the fold are free. Hopefully you can see in there that the stitches don't overlap each other. Maybe you can't, but that's what I'm aiming for. So now I can take out my running stitches that were holding the elastic at the right angle at the center. That's done its job now. I'm going to trim all these other threads off. I'm a bit of a fanatic about trimming threads off as you go. I know not everybody is, and people wait till the end, but I hate it looking all hairy and messy, and also sometimes it can kind of cloud the issue a little bit. You can't quite see what you're doing when you've got loads of little thread tails everywhere. But I'm quite prepared to accept that that might just be me. So now I need to turn the elastic to the inside, and obviously here it's not going to do that very happily. So the first thing to do is to snip up along that center line, whoopsie, to just short of my stitching. Can you see? I don't want to come past the stitching, obviously. I don't want to cut the stitching, and I don't want to come above it, because then when I turn it through there'll be a raw edge of fabric there. So I've snipped that, and then I'm going to also snip this elastic in the middle. I'm not going to cut any of it off. I need these tails, but I need them to be free of each other. Okay, just there. you can see that actually those stitches have caught each other in the middle, and I need to snip them off. I caught more than I thought. There we are. These two bits have to be free like that so they can turn inside. So I'm going to turn them to the inside and let them cross over each other. Can you see? That's going to be how they're finished inside, crossed over like that. It's kind of the only way you can do it really, without, and to make sure that everything's still smooth inside, which is our prime objective of the inside of a bra, to make sure it's all smooth. But also I like to think it does give a little bit of strength here, so even though you've shortened that bridge section, you've kind of reinforced it a little bit with these elastic tails. So now I'm going to do my 3-step zigzag to secure the other edge, just like I normally would. Of course, usually you'd be doing this when you've got the cups and everything sewn in, but I didn't really need to do that just to demonstrate this. I won't show you me stitching the whole of this along, but I will show you the center section because it gets a little bit tricky. So I'm going to put the machine back on. I'm going to put it on my 3-step zigzag and just turn the stitch width down a little bit. Okay, so pretending, as I just said, that your cups are in, your underwire casing's stitched on, and so on, I'm going to do the 3-step zigzag. So pretending that I've started at this end and come all the way along, I'm now at the center section. So let me get that lined up. And I want to kind of keep my eye on these two. I want them to end up being level and not to get twisted round. So again, just pushing towards the right hand side with my fingers just to make sure that my fabric isn't getting rucked up underneath. I'm just going to stitch along, and I'm going to stitch along to the center point there. Across both the pieces to the center. I'm going to just take a stab at that's where the center is. So then I'm going to leave the needle in, lift the foot up and pivot so I can come down the other side like that. Okay. And just get everything sorted out and tucked in. Okay, again, you don't need to see me do all the rest of it, particularly as it's not even real. Snip off my tails. There we go. And then you can see from this side, oh, nearly, I was very brave doing white, sorry, turn that off. White stitching on black fabric, but the idea is to sort of come up to the middle and carry on down. And then you've got these bits here. Now, if you don't like the look of that, or you don't trust that you can do that, of course you can stitch all the way up to there and stop, and then start again on the other side and stitch from there all the way down. It's up to you. You'll just end up with 2 lines of stitching going across there, which by the time you've got your seam allowance in there and so on is no big deal. You don't really see very much, but I quite like to test myself by seeing if I can make a half decent job of doing that. Otherwise, like I said, you can just sew all the way across. Then these edges, when you do your sorry, what's it called again? Yes, here it is. The underwire casing. When you stitch that down, you catch the tails underneath it, so everything all disappears under there and you hardly see anything. Can you see? So that in a nutshell is how you would draft and then sew a Gothic arch in your bra band.